welcome back to our virtual pilgrimage of Bella Roma. It's Rome.
Still only Rome.
Yeah. So today we get to talk about the Catacombs. Yay, dead people.
You might be thinking that the most beautiful thing in all of Rome can probably be found in some hidden little gem of a museum.
That's what I would think.
Or the most holy place in all of Rome would probably be like a church where some great saint did something.
Well, of course.
You'd be gravely mistaken.
Gravely mistaken.
Episodes about dead people.
Gravely.
Graves.
All right, moving on. One of the interesting things about the catacombs is in the early church, it was said that the Christians would actually go celebrate Mass down in the catacombs, which brings up an interesting question. Well, did they build altars down there, Casey?
Well, they didn't. They kind of used what they had already there.
Right. So what do you have down in the catacombs? Like caskets and sarcophagi, and that's about it. So they would actually celebrate Mass and use the sarcophagus or casket as the altar. And before they'd celebrate Mass, they would venerate the person in the casket, the saint, holy person, the martyr that had given their faith. They would venerate them by kissing that casket or kissing the altar they were about to celebrate Mass on, which, if we think about 2,000 years later, what we do at the beginning and end of Mass, the priest or deacon venerates the altar by kissing it, which is the same thing the early Christians do. So a pretty beautiful connection of venerating the saints, venerating our ancestors, those who have given their life, sort of saying we too, when we come to this altar, seek to give our lives, just as those great saints and martyrs did hundreds and thousands of years ago.
In fact, just yesterday we talked about the Confessio in our video about St. Paul's and St. Mary's and how there's often bones of martyrs underneath all of our altars still today. And so this tradition has been carried on since the very beginning of Christendom, which is pretty beautiful.
Pretty awesome stuff. Another awesome thing is to consider how people were buried down in the catacombs. Casey?
Well, the Christians had two very beautiful burial traditions. The first one being classless burials. Why would classless burials be like exciting or something new?
You always got the right questions, Casey. Well, when we think about the ancient Roman burials, there were different parts and different even types of cemeteries. Rich people and noble people were buried in rich and noble tombs, or even in completely different cemeteries for the rich. And when we think about modern society today, it's not really all that different. Sometimes there are sort of rich parts of a cemetery, or there will be bigger monuments for bigger and more important people. So classless burials, whether you're rich, noble, poor, whatever, that you're buried in the exact same type of grave, same location, there is no class distinction, says a lot about what we believe as Christians.
It certainly does, and I think even more beautiful is the way in which their bodies were laid to rest.
How were they laid to rest, Casey?
Well, interestingly, they were buried in the fetal position oftentimes.
Probably just to save space.
Well, no. You'd be wrong.
Again.
That's 3 times this week, folks. The fetal position was a sacramental sign of their trust in the resurrection, that they were going to be born into new life, and a life that would be everlasting into eternity with God. And this kind of professed faith is something that I wish I could do, and I wish I could have.
Pretty incredible. A physical fetal position showing a spiritual reality of being born into eternal life.
It's pretty beautiful, but
Cool.
We have other things that show us sacramental signs and belief in our resurrection, like artwork. And some of the first artwork we ever found from Christians was in the catacombs.
Pretty amazing that there'd be artwork down there. When I think of catacombs, I think of dark, dank, moist, just sort of not much life going on down there. Am I right?
Not the best place to put your art if you want it to last forever. I'm going to have to admit that.
Right.
But there are some really beautiful examples of Christian art.
What are some of your favorite examples, Casey?
My absolute favorite has to be the peacock. The peacock was an ancient Christian symbol, one of the very first. We've all heard about the fish, and yeah, who cares about the fish? It's about the peacock. The peacock, in the way in which it looks like a normal bird, I mean, it's a pretty bird, right? But it looks like a normal bird until it fans out all of its feathers, and it looks as if it's a totally different animal, a totally different creature all of a sudden. This is a sign of the early Christians in their belief about the change of the resurrection. What would happen to us when we die? That we would be glorified, much like Christ was glorified in his death and in his resurrection, that we would become a totally different creature. How beautiful it is to think that they were even thinking about how can we make sense of the glorification of our bodies, the glorification of our lives through the power of the resurrection. It's intense.
Pretty beautiful artwork dating back hundreds and even thousands of years. So I want you to tear that fish bumper sticker off your car, put up a peacock instead. That's way cooler, huh, Casey?
Flannery O'Connor will thank you. Look her up.
Awesome. Well, this pretty much concludes our episode on the Catacombs. Join us next time for our final episode of our pilgrimage through Rome. It's going to be a real doozy. We're going to keep it a secret until the next episode. So God bless and join us next time.
See you then.